I know the first sessions after lunch are difficult, but I think we have a couple of really interesting speakers and presentations waiting for you, so please do stay awake. I wanted to start basically with showing you the results of a drawing that has been done simultaneously by an artist who is kind of taking visual minutes of the conference. So you can see the reflection of the morning session discussion there. At the end of the conference, you will be able to see the full results, and we will, of course, share them also online. I think it's visual effects always are helpful, and he's a great artist, and it's also like the second type of visual minutes that we're taking that we can compare with the results from the conference last year that we had online, and to see how our thinking and discussions are evolving. But okay, now to open, this morning we heard presentations by different representatives from different municipalities who shared with us their existing or planned strategies for integrating food into urban planning and trying to consider how to move on further in this field. But we all know that municipalities are not the only actors in the food system, and they can definitely not make things change without others. And in this session, basically, we have some representatives of all this big group of others, so to say, that need to be involved in the process in order to hope that we can reach some kind of more transformative impact out of all the different changes that are beginning to take place across different cities. So today, the first presentation will be by Caroline Zeevat and Nienke Bouwhuis. They are from Rotterdam. And basically, they are representing a group of grassroots organizations that are finding their own way around the big labyrinth that the urban planning and urban food system represents in Rotterdam, and they will tell us a little bit more about how they are doing this, where they are, and what the results are so far, and also where they're going ahead in the future. So Caroline is an activist, a social entrepreneur. She has been working with different grassroots organizations, green food initiatives in Rotterdam, and is one of the co-founders of the local network that they will talk about. And Nienke is an architect who also started a small organization that is working towards co-designing more livable spaces across Rotterdam. But, well, I give the floor to them to explain a little bit more about their work. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We are very have a green light. Is it better now? Yeah, oh man. Yes, definitely. No. Yeah. Okay, let's go. So our presentation will probably be up in any minute now, but we're pleased to be here, as I just told you before the mic was working really well. Caroline and I were educated as designers. You're a graphic designer, I'm an architect. As leads, we were educated like this, and we are actually, we're now grassroots developers in Rotterdam. It's kind of a term we just thought of today, but that's really what we do. Because with this grassroots term, we always talk about this anyway, but we're developing the city in a different way, and we would like to tell you about how we do it, and we would also like you to reflect on this in the end, and not just reflect, but maybe you have good ideas on how we should carry on. We're really curious about this. Yeah, I'll give the floor to you.
How does it work?
Next.
Next slide, please.
The next slide.
Okay, I start to talk. Yeah, I try it.
Sure. We're getting new batteries. No, we don't.
I'm not so good with techniques, so...
Here's our next picture anyway. You can start the story.
Yeah. Rotterdam is an architectural city. and lots of stones, crowded, stony city, but we have green spots. Well, just a moment, please.
Previous slide.
Oh. Okay. Well, we have green spots, beautiful spots, and also edible urban farming spots. And from I go faster.
Yeah.
From 2000.
Yeah, no, here it is. City of High
next,
Rise.
please. This is a schedule made from the time 2001 till 2019 with all the edible green projects. And next, please. These are some examples. This is Stadslandbouw Schiebroek, urban farming Schiebroek South in a poor area, one of my projects. It's a social project, and we created with the people who live there 50 gardens. They had to design it themselves and own it themselves. And they grew food for the neighborhood, their families. And so this whole area transformed by growing greens and meet each other in the greens. Next, please. This is real urban farming, Stadslandbouw Natuurtalent. It's a farmer and she grows crops for 211 families who harvest their own. Next, please. We have food forests in Rotterdam that's developing very fast. Next. We have Rotterdam Mint. They grow herbs for the neighborhood with the people from the neighborhood. Very successful and beautiful spot. We have the next Green Connection. It's a network of green initiatives and it's a beautiful tour. With the exchange we bicycled the tour, and it's even for the doctors who tell their patients, how do you say it? Well, to do the tour on
and they have it big in their waiting room, the map of the Green Connection.
Next. This is urban farming in the heart of Rotterdam, the real center, very stony, beautiful spot and very successful. Next. And this is how we started.
This is how we started with Groen010. It's Groen010, and 010 is the area code of Rotterdam. So it's green Rotterdam, actually. But we call it Groen010, maybe Green010. I'll say Groen010 today. Actually, we started before there was a municipality election a while ago. 2017, I think we started, before Edisitnet came along, because we thought we have to join forces, be strong, and we thought that was a good idea. And we had a network meeting with an alderman-to-be. We have a lot of people who grow stuff, of course, and we had this debate. The third picture is a green debate. We organized about green, and we had about every politician from every party that was going to be in the election there. And of course, they all wanted the city to become greener. So we thought, whatever it means, they already say yes. So we wanted to have them in the yes mode, and they were. Anyway, that was 2017. And then later on, we organized further, and the Edisitnet project came along. It was interesting because first the municipality of Rotterdam hosted the project, but they stepped out. And then actually we got this phone call, maybe you guys want to carry on with the project because it's kind of interesting what you're doing in Rotterdam. So we said, we have Groen010, so yeah, Groen010 can carry the... So we did. So we started, so this is a picture that we all vote online. It was COVID time. This one. So we're all voting, well, one is outside. We're all voting online for let's do it, the official vote. Yeah, that we did it. And we took over.
The real start, this is the real start.
This is our real start of Groen010 in the Edisitnet. We were involved as individuals, more or less. So the next slide, we made a research together with Wageningen University about how to sustain green initiatives, actually. And out of this research came 4 action perspectives. We'll tell more about in 2 slides. So the next slide is that we invited the network to reflect on the research. So we do everything in co-creation with all the green initiatives that want to come to our meetings. And they reflected on this. And the next slide is that we also voted on the goal of what the Living Lab in Rotterdam should be about, and it was about setting up a citywide network of edible green initiatives to ensure the continuity of edible or non-edible green initiatives in the city. That's actually what Groen010 already had in their statutes. Is this English? I don't know, when we set up the association. So it was already our own goal, and it collided with combined very well with the EDICITNet goal. And in the next slide, I can tell you about the 4 action perspectives. So actually we form 4 working groups now, and we're working on the EDICITNet project in 4 working groups. One is about lobbying, one is about sharing knowledge, one is about making value of ECSs visible, edible city solutions. You probably all know this term. And we're thinking about the overarching association. The next slide is about our timeline, and Caroline will take over.
Yeah, so there was a lot of work to do, and we didn't know where to start. So one of our partners made a timeline. It not only looks beautiful, but we had a content how to start and where to work to. And the work group started. Next slide, please. And now we give you some examples from tools, how we strengthen the network, what we thought which should work to strengthen the network. That was, of course, a network meeting where we shared our progress and had reflections from the network. So to the next step and the next slide also. We had stakeholder meetings where we involved the stakeholders to cooperate with us. Next slide. Very important for the strengthen the network are green cafes every third Friday of the month every time on another spot, and we meet new people. And because the working group knowledge sharing thought all those formal meetings, people are really busy and we need some pleasure and fun and informal meetings. So the cafes are really a success, and we see the network expanding. Next slide, please. And well, we have the workshop diamond model. That's one of Nienke's work groups.
Yeah,
so
should I tell you about my working group? One of the things that I do is in the EDICITNet project is the working group making the diamond model. It's in the working group of value and visibility. So we want to make the value of green initiatives visible, which is really important part of the whole network in Rotterdam. And also when we talk about green initiatives, we always talk about the multi-values that green initiatives have to offer. Some green initiatives have really a lot to offer health-wise. Others are edible. You get people to eat healthy. People move more. They become healthy. They become mentally healthy. But also it has a lot of climate value, biodiversity, educational. So in this diamond model, we're making it, as you can see on this slide, we're actually making the diamond models in workshops. We did it together with Wageningen University as well. And we really like to cut and paste these models, because during this process of making it together, you have a discussion with the group. And this discussion, it's kind of like you need the thinking about how large should I cut this yellow piece, which is about education, and how large is your education piece? Oh, you have it because you could choose small, medium, or large for every value. And then you have these really nice discussions amongst each other, and it strengthens the network. Yeah. So it's really interesting that we're working about making our value visible, but actually you're having this discussion with all the other green network, all the other members of the green network. How do you do this on your Rotterdamse munt, or how do you do it in Schiebroek? And actually this talking about the making of your own model, it's really strengthening the network, and people think about their own initiative in a different way. So they also think about, how do I talk about my initiative next time? If I talk to somebody from the municipality, they're all in different silos. So the one about health, I have to talk about the health benefits. If you talk to the educational one, I have to talk about education. But the interesting thing is, if you have this model, we made them. On the next slide, you can see them. Oh yeah, here. And then you just take your paper model and you put it on the table, and then you say to this stakeholder, this is about education, but look, if you invest in education, for free you get all these other values. So this is actually what happens, because you never get everybody to invest in your project. And the next step of the diamond model, actually after we made these models and we have this self-reflection, is to, and we're working on this because we're also developing the model further, how to get the value back into your initiative, because the value always flows out. And it's, yeah, you need to invest some way or other. So this is also a conversation piece to talk with all these different stakeholders whose goals we are actually fulfilling with our green initiative, like water or education or learning the Dutch language for all the non-Dutch speakers. And, you know, there's so many values. So how do we get it, so that we can be self-supportive?
Next time we give a whole workshop.
Next time I will give you a whole workshop. Be welcome. Okay, next slide is for Caroline.
Another tool, in the meantime, kind of a new working group starts, and they wanted a national park, so they started a campaign. And this starts tomorrow. It's a pity we can't join them. And it's really huge with the museum and lots of people involved, that Rotterdam is not a stony city anymore, but it's a park. And we're all connected. And we can work in the park, we can play in the park, we can harvest in the park. And that's really a mindset. So I'm interested how this will develop. It's kind of new tool. The next, please.
It's a campaign, so that's really interesting. Yeah, okay, so the next slide, this one, the collaboration. We collaborate with other networks. So amongst ourselves, we collaborate with networks because we're not only individuals, but there are very many networks in Rotterdam already. And next to the networks, there are also stakeholders we collaborate with. That's the next slide. We had a really nice meeting with the city municipality at the Stadsmakerscongres. It's like a city makers congress, which is held every year. And actually we made a map of green initiatives. That was also our opening slide. I'll tell a little bit more about this later, but this map, we printed it really large, put it on the floor, and got all the people from the city municipality, one from biodiversity, one from the health department, one from the mobility, one from the green maintenance, one from the landscape department, and they all came, a lot from the landscape department, because they thought there will be a map made. Anyway, it was nice, they were all there, and the black line is like a bat path that we wanted to pull through the whole city of Rotterdam, and we just taped and put things on this map on the go, and it was a really nice discussion piece as well to get. On the next sheet you can see everybody who contributed. This is all the civil servants and us mixed, so we would like to do more of this working together with them. And actually in the next slide we can see another step that we did with the municipality. We now have a green broker, Els van Dam. She hosted the first Groen010, like a round table discussion. Actually, we've had more, but this was our first with the municipality, hosted by her, but we made it together. And we discussed 4 pieces, but I'm not going to explain the whole thing because we don't have too much time, but it's nice that we're sitting together with the municipality to talk about how can we work together. And this was interesting. The last... the orange one, the last circle, is really nice because in that circle we have some people involved who are also in the previous slide and who are also involved in some next slides. And there is 2 civil servants, one from the health department and one from the mobility department. They teamed up together. We can go to the next slide. And they saw that we made this groene connectie. You saw a picture before of the green connection when we're walking this 8-kilometer route. It's a coalition of 20 networks in the west of Rotterdam. And we also in 2015 already got together and joined forces to be also to be strong and sustain yourself. And this is actually a poster which is hanging large in the office of the GPs. And the city municipality realized that this is kind of an interesting way to work. So now these 2 municipal civil servants that I just told you about are actually helping us to make more in other places of the city. So on the next slide you can see the one in Overschie that we're making. This is more to the north of where the groene connectie is. This one is, we're making it, it's not, it's a concept still. And it's really nice that they adopted our way of working because we like to join forces not only in the field but also in the silos of the municipality. So on the next slide you see one that we're developing in the south of Rotterdam, the Groene Golf op Zuid. And the other one's called the Groene Overschiese. And we all have to decide names for this, but we don't decide on the names. We go into the network, we go to the people who have their community gardens there, we talk with them, and usually they're actually there are many that are already saying, can we also have a connection? When are you going to make one in our part of the city? So when we come there, they know, but then the map should go here and there, and we actually have really nice discussions with them about what should the name be and why should we in this area be connected. There's a lot of water in, of course, the Maas is coming through Rotterdam. Well, they all have a different, how do you say it? A different atmosphere, a different character. Yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, so the next slide is about the map that was the very first picture. So when we opened our session, it's that we made a website, Groen010.nl. It's also on the next picture. And actually we mapped out all the green initiatives that we could find, connecting all the networks that we know already. And we have a list of like 700 green initiatives now. We put it in GIS, is this an English term? Then you can map it. And on the base of this map, the Stadsmakers Congress, where we're sitting with all these people together, really happy. This map is actually a joint map with our network, our dots of all these green initiatives. And they put in the layer of the green project where the city is working on, the municipality. So we can actually, by using this GIS mapping, we can put the information together. So we're making steps in this, and we also wanted, to put more maps together and then take conclusions and go on. Now it's for you again, the next slide.
Yeah, we were happy last year to host the City Exchange in Rotterdam program. So that's also expanding the network and the conversations about all the issues we have in common. Next slide, please. And also to go abroad, and like we're here today, it's, for us, with lots of value to grow and develop, can grow and develop. Next slide, please. And of course, the EdiSitNet project was really a boost to develop the Groen010 Living Lab in Rotterdam. Next slide, please. But what about the future? It's really time for the next steps, and we have some ideas about it. But it will take some time and effort, and also new approaches. So we like to have a discussion. How can we implement new approaches in our project, but also for yourself, for your project, your cities? What can be the next step for you, and for us, for the world, and for the network? So, please.
If they have it right now, it's,
Okay, thanks a lot. I think our speakers actually wanted, as you could see, to reverse the role, and instead of you asking questions, they try to ask you. So if you have any suggestions for them on how to move on in the future and to continue to build their network, they're welcome. In the next couple of minutes, if not, think about this, and we can go back to this also during the discussion after the other two presentations. So if anybody has any immediate suggestions, please. Great.
I was very much inspired by the New York Swale project. I'm not sure if you know about it. It's a food forest boat, and they used it to create a cultural place to invite people, and also because it was on a boat that you could move. And Rotterdam has a lot of water, and you do have some green, because you're into architecture. I think some of the Dutch people collaborate with that project. And it's my dream one day to have a boat that travels around Europe, so you can inspire and bring your vision across Europe. And a boat is also slowing you a little bit down. But it's a very inspiring project. It's called The Swale from New York, and it was to bring food production closer to the city. And what we will have is water will be rising, so it's also the Ark of Noé thinking about. So I think might be a suggestion.
And what's your name? Because we make some notes.
My name is like flowers and trees. I'm called Trees. And our NGO is called Trees Bark Today. Bark Today is the...
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice idea. Yeah, yeah. We have enough water.
When you were talking, you said that your map is up in doctors' offices around Rotterdam, and I found that quite interesting because in the UK, I guess we call that social prescribing, where your doctors might prescribe like going to a community activity or something instead of having medicine. Yeah. So it's just in terms of the future, I was wondering whether there's any, could you get any funding from your municipality to carry on what you're doing if you present it as something that is also beneficial to people's health? So kind of moving away just from the fact that it's like food and green spaces, but also well-being as well.
Yeah, actually the maps that we make, the new maps, when we are asked to make, like I showed you the Green Connection, we just thought this is a good idea, we have to do it. No funding, we just started because we saw this opportunity. But the next maps that are developing, we are having some funds for this. Actually, an opdracht, what's in English? An assignment. So we write out for an assignment and from the municipality, and one time it came from the mobility department, but also in the beginning, and it will again come from the health department, because they are really interested in this, like nature on prescription. Yeah, it's great. So we hope this will be something that more people can do. Yeah.
It is not really a question, it's just a curiosity suggestion, because it's the second time that I heard about a city becoming a proposal of a city becoming a national park. And I wanted to know if you know about there is a foundation, I forgot the name now, that is proposing that in London. So
yeah.
You can, okay, so you...
Yeah, that was the inspiration. Yeah, what's your name?
Giovanni.
Thank you.
Nice.
I think I saw, yes, another hand at the back.
There were two, actually. Yeah, in time also.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, I know you were asking us to give you statements, but I was thinking, how do you see the development of the map? Do you see it as a social tool for things like doctors, or do you have a bigger plan for the mapping there?
Yeah, we have a lot of plans for the mapping, because it has so many values. So you could use it for all these different values and all these different themes. But what would be really great with the mapping is that we would have like a citywide map, that we would have like the Olympic rings, that all the connections are connected. So you could make also a larger route, but also it's nice that there's a kind of an ownership, like in Delfshaven, where the Groene Connectie is. It kind of belongs to the people who live there, and they feel they're kind of the owner. Oh, it's in our region of the city, and I think this is interesting to keep it, to keep the ownership there. So then, then it's nice that if you have this ownership, you can also see others, kind of, and then reflect amongst each other. How are you working? How are we working? And you can strengthen each other, because you can, you have a different scale on talking, because you have this connection on another level. You're not initiatives talking amongst each other, but you're a coalition talking to another coalition, and this is also really good to strengthen. I don't know if this really answers your question. Kind of, okay. Yeah, good.
Maybe a last question, and then we can go back to that at the end. Well, suggestion actually, maybe, I don't know.
Hi, I just wondered, how are you funded?
Good question. Well, yeah, you tell. How are you funded?
Oh.
Because what's really nice is that we have the EduCitNet project now, so we can do everything that we always wanted to do, because it fits into the EduCitNet project. And for the rest, we really have to look for funds. Sometimes we get assignments from the municipality. Other people have funds. It's different. Every initiative now has to find their own funds, basically. So it's quite a job to do this.
Yeah, I work in my project with assignments. I love to work with housing corporations, because then you have the social and they have the green spaces, and they have money and also ideas how to transform the poor parts of the city. Well, thank you. And we hope we can stay in contact and expanding this network.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Carolina and Nienke. As some of you may have noticed, the name of the session was kind of governance innovations for driving the food system transformations. And in fact, what they did was try to show us how it is being done and it can be done in practice by turning the roles around from the established modes of participation. Just also to make a note that health was mentioned, there is one of the parallel workshops on the last day of the conference will touch upon those issues about urban green infrastructure and health issues. So if you're interested, please try to attend that session. And also another linkage to make, the diamond model that Nienke referred to. There is, during the poster session, there you will have the chance also to talk with people from Wageningen who were behind the development of that model and to learn a little bit more about that. So with that, I would like to move on now to our next speaker. Apart from grassroots organizations like the ones that Nienke and Carolina represent, researchers also have a role to play. We heard in the morning from people focusing on studying some of the issues that we're dealing with more in depth. And today, now in the next two presentations, we will have people who are focusing on studying this type of systems a little bit from the outside while interacting with the different stakeholders and hear their perspective. So the next speaker will actually continue some of the issues that were mentioned during the morning session. I think you may have noticed that the speakers from Barcelona were discussing public procurement as one of the tools for driving this type of transformations. So Kristin, Reichborn-Kjennerud, I'm sorry with the pronunciation, from the Oslo Metropolitan University is going to take us on a tour of urban procurement from across Oslo and I think outside. But I believe she also has a few questions for you. So please, when you are ready, you can start. Okay. No.
I work as a professor at the Oslo Metropolitan University, and we have, I'm leading a project there that is it's a research and innovation project that wants to help public organizations, mainly municipalities. There are 14 participants, to buy food and catering services more sustainably. Is this, yeah, yes. So the idea with the project, thank you. Gracias. Can I sit there? I can stand also. The idea with the project is to use procurement as a tool to make cities more sustainable, more socially and environmentally sustainable, and actually also using procurement as a tool in placemaking. A little bit like you were talking about, because the municipality buy services from you. So this is a way that you can fund green initiatives, because one big, and we've seen this in the City project, that one big challenge is the economic sustainability of these initiatives that are really good for the population's health. It's better than giving them pills. Yeah, so I wanted to start by telling you a personal story, because at my former workplace, I was traveling from the capital to the west of the country, and it was a public organization, and I used to stay at this small, independent hotel that was employing people on welfare, and they only served local food. And I really liked to stay there. It was a really nice, authentic atmosphere, very modestly priced, and I always love to come there. It's like this old building and stuff. And one day when I came back to the economy department at my workplace, this accountant told me that, okay, Kristin, if you're going to continue to stay at this hotel, you're going to have to pay that yourself, because we have this huge framework agreement with the biggest hotel chain in the whole of the Nordic countries, and that's where you're going to stay, even though the hotels are more expensive. And I didn't actually like that, because I like to use my budget to sort of support this small, unique hotel. So I used the next 3 years of my life to write this proposal to get that project to help public organizations and municipalities to buy from smaller suppliers and social entrepreneurs, which I find more sustainable. So it's not only my personal experience, because white papers also show that this is a general problem, at least in Norway, that public organizations and municipalities, they actually don't buy from smaller, independent food producers and social entrepreneurs. So I also wanted to ask actually your experience with this. So I have given you a code. If you can, it's actually someone has already started to answer, even though I haven't asked you to answer yet. So actually I thought it was an error, so I sort of removed the answer. So just answer again, because if you go to worldwidewebmenti.com and use that code, it's the code 29506403. You can share your own experiences with this. So the first question is it easy for small food producers to sell their products to public organizations?
Repeat the code.
The number is 29. It's also there, if you can see it. It's 29506403. So the first question is whether it's easy for small food producers to sell their products to public organizations such as municipalities. The second question is if it's easy for social entrepreneurs to sell their products and services to public organizations. And I would say Groen010 is a social entrepreneur. So is it easy for municipalities to buy services from people like them? And the third one is to public organizations. Is it easy for public organizations to buy local and sustainable food during the season? Thank you. Just keep showing it to them. And also, I wanted to ask you also if you could write down your example. What are your successful and less successful examples of public organizations buying food locally and sustainably? Because I think there's a certain gap between good intentions and actual implementation or praxis. I mean, the first presentations we saw this morning actually shocked me, and I'm sort of worried that we're not better at implementing these system changes that will help the planet and people as well. Yes, so I think that the people speaking in the beginning of the day really made it clear that the food system is one of the biggest environmental and climate polluters, and if we can change the food system, we're actually doing something that will matter and will, the systems change that is needed can start by changing the food system. So the question is if we can go towards a more circular system, and that means local. Can we consume, produce food and handle our waste more locally? It seems that, the system, the way it's set up now, I talked to someone in the break also that we're actually not allowed to buy local seeds. We're not allowed in contracts. Either to ask for local products. It's against the regulations. And we're also not, there are regulations pertaining to compost and the waste that we produce that limit our way of reusing that and using it more locally. It tends, at least in Norway, we tend at least to have long versus short supply chains where, you know, we need a lot of plastic to prohibit the food from deteriorating instead of buying more locally. And these big food companies have long supply chains and they're not locally oriented. So, for example, if you have a surplus of carrots in the season, maybe they will go to food waste instead of these big companies using them because they have planned their whole year and they are very like rigid in the way they operate. And, you know, public organizations, which is sort of managing our tax money, they tend to favor these big companies with big contracts. Actually, they enter into contracts that prevent them from buying from someone else than the company they're entering into a contract with, so the exclusive contracts. Whereas shorter supply chains and buying from buying from farmer shops implies shorter supply chains. It means you shouldn't enter into these exclusive framework contracts with big companies because it makes it hard to buy from local smaller shops and farmer shops. For example, in my projects, I've seen that schools, nursing homes, and kindergartens, for example, they are not actually allowed to buy from the farmer shops because they have an obligation to buy from the company that the municipality has entered into a contract with. And then you can ask yourself, is it really the case that the law is preventing them from doing that? And what the law is saying is that you can't use the word local you can't in a contract as a criterion. But other than that, you're free to enter into the contracts of your own choosing. It's just that in the procurement departments, there are multiple reasons why they tend to enter into contract with bigger companies. And one thing, it's practical. Another thing is logistics. It's also cheaper, and they have oftentimes small budgets. Maybe it takes less time for them, and sometimes these big companies give kickbacks. So yeah, you cannot ask for local in public procurement, but they tend to ask for cheap. And at least from what I see, few use criterion such as they don't ask for sustainable or ecological that much. There are some good examples, like the municipality of Oslo. I think they only buy milk that is ecological. So, but that's not what's most common. I forgot to look at the watch, so I'm not sure. Yeah. So it makes it harder for example, my university to buy from vegan, smaller catering companies, such as that. This is an example of really tasty, great food. They call themselves Happy Foods, this one. But you can also, like, when you buy catering, you can actually combine that with supporting people outside of the work market. And we're actually trying that out as an experiment within the Edisitnet project right now. And I hope that will show good results so that we can continue to do that. I also have other examples, not only my university, but we have these, one of the municipalities in the southeast of Norway, they have this town center, and they are hiring this catering company, and they have criteria such as specifying what type of food they want to be served, like healthy plant-based food, and also that the company employ people outside of the work market. They also have contracts that allows kindergartens and other municipal organizations to buy fresh and local food during the season. And now they also plan a health center where they want to sort of make their procurement, they use their procurement as a tool in placemaking, because they sort of want to plan this health center and combine it with growing local apples, combine it with urban farming, hens, bees, and solar panels, because these are farmers, old farmers that live in this health center. Yes, so that's an example of how you can use procurement as a tool in placemaking. I want also to mention our living lab in Edisitnet, where this old museum, which is placed in a sort of challenge area, but nobody used the estate. And then with the Edisitnet project, they have combined the maintenance of the museum with the community garden, test beds, and it has turned into a local meeting place, which is really needed in this area, because a lot of the private spaces there are privatized. So they cultivated 7 acres of land from nothing. And it's really great to see. I'm just a little bit worried about, after the Edisitnet funding disappears, what is going to happen, you know? Can the municipality still support them? Through procurement, for example. How can we make the system more sustainable to help us with the economic sustainability of these initiatives that are so beneficial for the local community and the community as such. Yes, so they turned barren land into fertile soil and a local meeting place and community garden. So here you can sort of see the main plot that they are cultivating. Another example is Gjesdal municipality, which is also in the southeast of the country. So the municipality is really have a dialogue with the big food company and knows how much they buy locally. They also, if they ask the big food company to buy local food products, they do so, even though they have entered into, they're sort of making the contract flexible by not being too specific. And they also they're also using this weaving mill as a local center, where they have employed this chef that serves local food and makes his own super tasty, famous buns. They employ people on work training, and locals as well as immigrants come and cook food there. So I'll say that also an example of placemaking using procurement, also employing this this chef. Actually, they're renting the building, but there are a lot of, you know, there are a lot of ways you can combine different tools to get the results that you want. You have more possibilities than you would think. How much? 2 minutes. Okay. So I just wanted to throw up in the air other ideas for placemaking. I'm really interested in local markets. I know I've been to Madrid also, and I know the local markets there are challenged. Earlier, you know, the families used to go to the markets to buy pig stomach, and now that has turned into sort of entertainment for tourists. I know that both in Madrid and Barcelona, the tourism is a challenge. But you know, municipalities can increase social sustainability through using local markets, giving free access to land, buildings, streets, and places for selling local food. Yeah, this is just a picture of my own market. We have honey that is produced like 100 meters away from my house, and that's my mother and my son. And we have another example of how growing food, and this is not that much about procurement because we have this local farm just by the highway in Oslo, and it was the developers. Developers are actually starting to take initiative for social and environmental projects like this. So they started the farm. They just carried a lot of soil to the harbor area where they're developing these new building blocks. It's just by the highway, and it was an art project dedicated to urban farming. And actually now they have a local farmer employed by the municipality. So that's a fun example. Yeah, so you can support your social entrepreneurs like the ones sitting here, and I think the way the system works now, this is at least one way of contributing to better social sustainability in cities. Yeah, so I want to thank you for listening, and I want to sort of switch to this other computer to show you the results, if that's possible. Yeah. I think it's this one. Yes. Doesn't actually show how many answered, but you have 48 people. So on a scale from 1 to 5, 1.6 is the mean score for how easy it is for small food producers to sell their products to public organizations. 1.8 for how easy it is for social entrepreneurs to sell their products and services to public organizations. And public organizations do not find it easy either to buy local and sustainable food during the season. So this is something you as public organizations can do something about. There are, I don't know if, how can I see these answers? I know I probably used my time. I can share this with you if you email me. Enter. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so if you're curious about the results, you can just approach me and ask for my email, and I'll share it with you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kristin. And just to know that, yes, we will try to make sure that we can share those results later on together with the presentations after the conference. But also another note, there will be another session on Friday, which will focus specifically and more in-depth on public procurement. So if you're interested in that topic further, please make sure to attend that one. So thanks a lot, Kristin. And now I would like to move to our last speaker, Anna Moragues, who recently published a book that kind of makes a nice overview and summary of urban food governance and policies. And she's going to try to give us a brief overview of the insights from that research that she undertook with other colleagues from working on different parts of the food system. So Anna is a senior research fellow at the University of Barcelona, and her work mainly focuses on urban and regional development, sustainable food security, social justice, and she has a strong dedication to making an impact based on her work. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nevelina. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here. I am aware I have a small challenge that everybody must be a bit tired after like the whole morning, then having a very nice lunch, then this like very nice spring day, the sun coming in. So I hope we can keep our energy levels a bit up. And I also have a bit of an academic presentation, so oh my God. I'll try to be as light and as engaging as possible, but please give me your questions at the end. And as you can see also, my voice is not very well. Have some small children at home, and so I'm not feeling great, but here we are. So let's go for it. As Nevelina was saying, I was going to talk about urban food governance, and we just developed, finished a a handbook that is called the Handbook of Urban Food Governance. And I'm very bad at selling books, so I didn't bring any here, and neither put like the cover on it. So, but I'll tell you what it's about. And if you're interested, now publishers don't let us do like delivering the PDFs. They don't even give us a PDF anymore. But all the authors in the handbook are very committed to sharing their work, so you can email them and they will share with you the chapters in a non-edited format. So we'll try to do our best with what we have with the publishing companies. But anyway, so urban food governance, as we all know, there's a growing community around urban food, around urban food policy, around things that are happening in cities with food, and here you have amazing examples of what's going on, and we're moving from not only working on individual cities, but also creating all these amazing networks like this project, like the Milan Food Policy Pact, like the C40, like all the things that are going on globally. And also the voices of cities are also reaching to global arenas, and we saw that in the UN Food Systems Summit now almost 2 years ago. But this voice of cities and the role in changing food and changing the food system is there. And here's a very beautiful picture of the Sustainable Food Cities Network when it was called like that, before it changed to places, and all the great people that are there, that represent 60 places around the UK who have urban food strategies and food policy councils. And here's just like a picture of all the networks that are going on internationally, nationally, and globally. There are many more things happening, but these ones are some of the key ones. So we are really connected, and we are doing things across many levels and many spaces. So why are we doing more things? The outcomes of this book, it has been quite an intense project. It started just before COVID kicked in, and we have been collecting chapters from practitioners, from academics, about theory, about concepts, about practices, about policy tools, about histories of urban food, about the future of urban food. And some of the things that we summarize is like, why is this happening? Well, first of all, there's an increased political power and symbolic power of cities around the globe. There has been a lack of national leadership. Some of states are catching up now in terms of creating wide food strategies, more comprehensive spaces, and more participatory as well. But really, it was cities like almost now like 20 years ago that started doing this like very connected work. Also, cities are black holes, aren't they, in terms of like using resources, in terms of like what is going on there. So really, the process of global urbanization is aggregating many of the challenges that we have in terms of health, in terms of the environment. But also cities have this capacity of being like close to the citizens. They have this capacity to innovate in the governance space, of bringing together civil society, the public sector and the private sector, and do something that is local and that is relevant for people. And at the same time, we're really using this complex way of thinking about food systems, not only thinking about agriculture and rural areas, but also being able to think about the role of cities, how it impacts on health, how it impacts on the environment, on the economics, on social and culture, and so on and so forth. So we talk a lot about this rise of urban food governance, but one of the things that I think is very important to straighten from the beginning is that it's not the same talking about governance than talking about policy. And because now we do policies in a participative way, we think it's the same, but it's not the same. Here you have two very academic definitions of urban food governance and urban food policy. And my colleague Jane Battersby and I thought it was important to make this distinction, because we might think then that we develop a participative process to develop a food policy for our city, that we're really talking about the governance of food in our city. But we're not, because there are many actors that are not involved there, that are shaping the food environments that we have in our cities, that are shaping what is happening in our cities in relation to food, that have real power in the food system to shape that. And many times those powers are not visible and are not sitting in a table around with us. So we have to be aware of this. And I use this, I think this very informative and very useful infographic from IPES Food about the the concentration of power in the food system that allow us to understand a bit more what's going on. I really like one of the geographers that I really like is David Harvey when he talks about knowing what's going on in cities and what is power in cities. He says, follow the money. Follow the money in cities. Where is the money? What is the money in food in cities? How much money do your municipalities invest in food in relation to the budget to other sectors? How much? Do we know? To start with, is it relevant? Is it such a small budget that is almost ridiculous? We haven't even mapped it. And then the amount of money that there is in food within the cities, in a city, for example, like Barcelona, if we think about restaurants, if we think about markets, if we think about buying food, there's so much money in food, so many jobs, but are those really on the table when we talk about developing food policies? Are we really engaging with the power in the food systems? Well, probably not so much. So it is important to have this distinction about policy and governance so that we are aware that we create these important spaces where we are seeking for transformation, but that the governance of our urban food system goes beyond those policy participatory spaces. So what we've done with this handbook is, okay, we said we have developed some nice concepts, nice definitions. Let's try to go a step forward and let's try to develop more of a framework that is not going to be definite, but it can help us start mapping some of the elements that we need to think about when we talk about urban food governance. And of course, the people that I have developed this framework with, we take a critical approach to it. And the editors of this handbook have been Jane Battersby, Jill Clark, and Anna Davis, and the four of us have developed this framework. So the framework has different elements. The first one is time matters. So we have to account for history and how these layers of history and conditioning, what we can do in our cities. There are some cities that have real powers in terms of their food. And we saw some very powerful examples coming from Brazilian cities. But there are other cities that are stripped out of their powers, like some examples of African cities where food policy and food governance are mostly about rural areas and food security and agriculture. So it's important to understand these historical legacies in terms of what we can do and what are the powers that we have. Also, to recognize these racist colonial histories that are shaping what our cities are to date right now. No, some of the work of Harriet Friedman around this, how London became like the capital of the empire and its connections to all the colonies in terms of like how they were feeding the capital of the empire. These are very important elements to think when we want to acknowledge what's going on in our cities and how is that conditioning what we're seeing in our cities. Not only that, we also have used these frameworks that are racist, that are colonial, to understand what's going on in our cities. So maybe we need to go back and revisit those as well. If we talk about, we cannot understand our city without looking at how it has been conformed. And here you have two beautiful pictures of Barcelona. Well, one of them is a painting, and how it has evolved the city. But we also have to engage with the future. We have to incorporate the voice of the youth, but we also have to engage with the future in participative ways. What type of future we want, and also to plan for the future that might happen, but we might not want as well. I have been in some very depressing participative scenario development in the UK when everybody thought that Brexit was not going to happen. And it was very telling to plan for a scenario of Brexit and what it will happen to the food system there and how it all laid out. This is important thinking about the past and the future because we can also see things that right now we think are not possible. For example, here in Barcelona, we had public bakeries like centuries ago. We did amazing things when COVID hit, and we thought that things that were impossible to do, there were policies that were implemented. So when we look to the past, we see that there are things that right now seem not feasible or impossible that can be possible, and we need to think about the future with that flexibility as well. The second element is place matters. Of course, every place is different, so it's necessary to adopt this place-based approach and to engage with that when we're thinking about changing the governance, addressing the governance issues of our cities. And here's the academic jargon. We like to think about the urban as a trialectic. What does this mean? First, this means that the urban is a spatial container that is different from the rural. So urban areas are different from rural areas. And we see that in the density, we see that in the importance of transport, of how we move around the city, the lifestyles related to the urban, the food environments related to the urban. So we cannot just say, okay, it's the same, it's just all local food policies. No, we have to really engage with what it means to be in an urban area and the possibilities and the responsibilities of that. The second one is that the urban is also a conceptual terrain. There are many actors defining what is the city, what the city should be, what can the city be. And here we have something that we call the Barcelona brand, which is quite interesting, which is part of this conceptual terrain, where it's like the capacity that Barcelona has to create trends, to influence as a city as well. So this conceptual terrain about values, about discourses is very important. And finally, a governance structure, the capacities, the roles that you can play in the city, the powers that you have. So in terms of taking this place-based approach, we have to move from championing what will be called best practices to what we call good practices, because in each place the best practice will be different. So we have to build into this territorial diversity. The third one, relationships matter. Relationships matters in many different aspects, and there are 4 that we wanted to emphasize here. First, we cannot think of the urban as disconnected from what happens in the regional, in the national, in the global scale, and I think you are all very aware of that. Second, we have spatial interdependencies, like for example here, Barcelona is not being fed by its hinterland. It will be beautiful, it will be amazing, but it's not the case. In fact, there are some research that shows the impact that Barcelona has, for example, all the soja that comes from from Brazil and the destruction of the Amazon, of the Amazonia, that comes through the port of Barcelona. So we're having an impact not only on our hinterlands, we're having an impact globally, and it's important to understand these spatial interdependencies and work with them, and to readdress them. That's a very, very complicated challenges. The third element in terms of relationships is that our capacities to act, the capacity to act of a municipality, of civil society, of a specific NGO, of a company, is shaped by the capacities to act of other actors. That means that, for example, in places where we have a strong civil society, sometimes the state goes backwards and civil society takes over many functions that, in principle, were not theirs. But in places where the civil society is weaker, sometimes the welfare state is taking over many aspects of facilitation or many aspects of actually delivering services or community development. Not only that, sometimes we talk about these big categories, the private sector, the public sector, civil society. Within that, there are walls. So we have to be aware that we cannot just talk about the city council. I have the pleasure to work with city councils, and within the city councils there's so much diversity. There's people engaged, people not engaged, people that want to do things, people that want to do things, people that have the knowledge, people that don't have the knowledge. So there's such a big diversity that we need to acknowledge that and those relationships within these spaces. And finally, the importance of relations is also in relation to governance, is that sometimes when we think about governance and policies, we think about this policy, this program, this initiative, this food policy council. And governance is not like that. Governance is about the networks that were presented before. It's much more fluid, and sometimes we come together and do something, and then we go and move to the different things. And this kind of like fluidity and these tools that we have to be fluid are important in order to think what we can do together to change things as well, and only think about the more structural and formalized spaces that sometimes don't have really a very transformative use. The fourth one, I just have one more left after this one. The fourth one is that diversity matters, and diversity in many different ways. No? Developing this handbook has been a real pleasure. Everybody told me it was going to be hell to edit a project like this. And it was a real pleasure because I had amazing co-editors and the contributors were amazing as well. And what we could see was we were able to pull together all this diversity in ways of like how we understand the food system and how we understand cities and the intersection of cities and food and conceptual frameworks and discourses and so on and so forth. And what we can see is the importance of like, there's no one approach that is going to do it all. So we need to really have these dialogues between concepts, between approaches, and between types of knowledge so that we can understand better the complexity. One of the key elements here is bringing forward the lived experience of how different people live the food environments in cities. This is really key, so that they are part of like our knowledge and our co-construction of knowledge. And of course, one of the challenges, but one of the needs is to generate diverse and inclusive spaces of interaction, which in many cases, despite trying very hard, this is a very difficult thing to do, to develop places, like spaces where they are really inclusive, where people from different backgrounds and knowledges really come together, and that these spaces don't generate new inequalities. Sometimes I have been around some of these spaces here and in other countries that I've worked, and you look around the room and everybody looks very similar. So we have to rethink that, and we have to see how we can provide different tools and be more flexible and creative to address these inequalities. And the final dimension of this framework that we hope helps practitioners but also academics to think about urban food governance and push us forwards a little bit in this agenda collectively are power dynamics, which is what I started with when I was talking about the difference between policy and governance. And power dynamics are across all the elements that I said, are across relationships, time, are across diversity, are across the creation of place. No? So power is at the center of it all. So we need to understand the capacities that different actors have, but we also need to uncover these invisible forms of power that are not like that clear to us, that are not like sitting in a room, in a table around us, but all these dynamics that happen behind and that are, in many cases, where the money is, that are shaping our food environment. I was speaking some years ago with two amazing cities, Brighton and New York, and they were telling me that they have done so much, but when they look at the data and how much they have actually advanced, it's nothing or very little, but because they are, and that's almost kind of like a win, because they are working against this machine of fast food, ultra-processed food, and all of these obesogenic food environments that are capturing our cities. So it is important to not just have the initiatives. If I change the public procurement in my school, but then my school is completely surrounded by fast food and processed food and all of this, then, well, there's very little that I can actually change. No? So one of the things that is important in terms of power as well is to ask us, when we try to develop new spaces, new networks, new projects, whether these collaborative multi-stakeholder spaces are really contributing to shifting power, to actually not reproducing inequalities in the food system. And some ways forward that some colleagues highlight in the handbook, but also elsewhere, is that maybe we need to start to think not only of the value of agreeing, but also the value of conflict and dissent, and working through those conflicts and through dissents together. Also, to unveil from the beginning that we sit on a table, but we have like very different powers from the beginning. So maybe we have to be more explicit about that and how we deal with those different powers that we have from the beginning, including in academia, that we have specific power as well and hold a specific status as well. So we need to interrogate the values of this governance process. And I think that mobilizing a human rights approach, putting people in the center, thinking about those that are at the margins of the food system to define mechanisms of participation could be a key way of moving forward. And with this, thank you, and we'll take questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anna. This was a beautiful way to bring so many different and diverse perspectives and aspects together. We are behind schedule, as you know. We already started like this session with a half an hour delay. But I think we would like to make use of all the people that we have here. So I would like to ask for, if you're okay, that we continue with another maybe 15, 20 minutes discussion, although we are approaching the end of the session, yeah? And if not, you're welcome also to leave. And but I would like to give the chance to everybody to also to learn from all the speakers who are here. So, if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and Paul will come to you. I think I saw first the lady there. Yeah.
The book is in English. Is the Handbook of Urban Food Governance. Is published by Routledge. The first chapter, I think, is available open access. But as I said, you can flick through the index, and you can email the authors. And I don't even have the PDF of the whole book. So, I mean, I'm very sorry about this. This is part of what we're facing in academia as well. So everybody's like stressed with power relations and things like that. So.
So, sorry, I've been studying hydroponics and aquaponics as well, because that's a famous topic when it comes to nurturing within food system. But isn't it an idea to also introduce the nutritional value of food in procurement and in policies, and because that's where the difference is going to be if you have the big industries with chemical fertilizer giving hydroponics in big buildings that are empty. It's maybe something to introduce to make a difference in the value of the food that we're eating.
Is this a question or just a suggestion? If
Hello? Yeah. I think that's especially important in nursing homes with the older people getting more and more sick and old that eat very little, so the amount that they...
It has nothing to do with the amount of food, but the way we produce food today, it's so unnatural that it's on water-based, on high water-based food with fertilizers in the system to produce a lot. But if you eat one salad that has no nutrition value for a human, then you get stuck. And that's what's, I think, the fear is in those edible cities. What's going to happen is a big apartment block that's empty, and it's going to be full of creating synthetic food that looks like salad, but it has no nutritional value for us. So it's really something to look at, because that's how you can differentiate when it comes to eco-agroecology food that has really a lot of value on the nutritional base, so that they have to go local and have to have a better food, because the food we're eating, it's rubbish. Eh?
Well, the answer is yes. I think we should take it.
Maybe just to comment on that, I think one of the challenges that we have with procurement is establishing the criteria, and the criteria that is used mostly in terms of types of food production is around the certification that we have, that is whether it's organic or not, and how we implement that. And then we have all the certifications of whether they are like protected destinations of origin and things like this that we can use here in Europe as well. It will be important to move towards that. I think in the last years, there's also been a diminishment of the interest around organic food and the way that food is produced but there's a big agreement around the need for more local food. So I think we really need to do a lot of work about the importance of how we produce the food and who produces the food as well, in terms of incorporating it, because the debate around organics right now, I think the public interest is lower than it was 5 years ago.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah. Go.
Yeah, I think I'm now okay. In the last presentation, you were talking about conflict, well, kind of seeing the value of conflict more. Do you have example for that, and who's the conflict partner? Because within our organization, we kind of, in the end, those who didn't want change were always those who earned money on it, you know, and we didn't have the power to go into conflict with them. So was it like the public opinion, or was it more like the municipality going into conflict?
Conflict is a very big issue. I mean, this idea of the productive side of conflict is that I think we, in many circumstances, we overvalue like general agreement, or what do you call it? It's not consent. It's sorry. Yeah, well, kind of like that. When things are voted by, like, everybody is kind of like in agreement, no, and there are like by consensus. Perfect. That's the word. And consensus is not necessarily always good when there are different interests and different values, and there's a lot of literature that it says that any socio-ecological change, there's going to be winners and losers, and we need to accept that. I mean, for example, if we talk about the transition towards in places like Spain or in Europe of eating less meat and then producing less meat, there's going to be winners and losers there, and we need to deal with that. And we cannot just like look for agreement constantly as that's the only way forward. We need to know how to deal with conflict. And I think this is something that we also experience in our personal life. I mean, we all have conflicts with people that we care for, people that we don't care for, and we have to deal with it and solve them and try to solve them in a productive way so that we learn from what has happened and we can move forward and implement decisions. So it is about not giving not giving the maximum value to any process to actually reach consensus, but actually to reach solutions and put the people that are more disempowered and that are more vulnerable in the food system in a better position at the end of the process, rather than just reproducing the same power status. And I think many of us are afraid of conflict. Conflict is not easy, and we have to develop this capacity socially to deal with conflict, because we're having conflicts constantly. I mean, the only thing is that we're just assuming that the status quo generates these winners and losers, and we're not going to change that dynamic, no? So there's something about being able to deal with conflict in the spaces that we create, and sometimes we'll have like outcomes that everybody's comfortable with, and sometimes we won't, but there will be different strategies to pursue. I think there's always different strategies to pursue a more sustainable food system. Sometimes it's by confrontation, sometimes it's by creating agreements, sometimes by working with government, sometimes it's opposing government, sometimes it's opposing companies, sometimes it's working with companies, and many of them are needed at the same time in some ways. So I think we just need to be a bit less afraid, be a bit more brave about embracing this importance of what are the values behind this, who's winning, who's losing, and then like work with that. And it is not easy, it's not comfortable, but our world is changing, our ecosystems are changing. We also need to, I think socially, we also need to evolve in that sense, rather than just be comfortable either by consensus or by complete confrontation and just leave it there.
May I ask? Follow up on this power issue. This morning there was the debate on typical, alternative shops or shops that are dedicated to more biological produce and such. In the Netherlands, actually some of my students like to go to have an internship and a job at Lidl, because they are reputed in the country for being very positive in having more biological produce. That's interesting. But in your cities, how are the retailers and maybe also the restaurant chains or the McDonald's and such, how are they actually reacting to this? Are they actually just negating it because it's too small? Are they opposing it? Are they embracing it? Can you tell about the free cities, how actually the practice is there?
I think maybe the cities, no? Yeah.
Maybe we start with Rotterdam.
No, let's not start with Rotterdam. No idea.
Oslo?
I think that they have this chain concept where they pre-plan the calendar for the whole year. They know exactly what month they're going to have what crop. And if that sort of is not that right time and date, then it can rot on the field. So I think it's something unhealthy about these chains. They're not locally oriented. I think it takes a lot to orient them locally. I don't know if the future is to have these chains? I hope not. They're making our lives less interesting. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's some of the part of really addressing complexity. Just thinking we don't have like black or white. We don't have small farmers and big farmers, intensive farmers and agroecological farmers. We don't have like just like big supermarkets and just like very small markets. We have like very diverse and very complicated things happening. So there's a lot of hybrid situations, and we need to be able to understand that hybridity and what it contributes to in terms of the transition that we want to do. For example, I lived for many years in the UK, and the shops that were selling fresh produce were buying the fruit and veg to Lidl because it was cheaper than going to the wholesale market. So these crazy things are happening, no? Like you think you're going to a small shop to support the owner, and then you're buying fruit from Lidl, but through the shop. So it's just all these things are happening at the same time. I think the big corporations are very good at spotting very quickly market opportunities, and they will do anything to actually continue with the business. If local food is in fashion, I have local food. If organic food is in fashion, I have organic food. If I can put the face of a farmer, I have the face of a farmer in my, and then maybe I have like 80% ultra processed food in my supermarket, but the space where I have the fruit is beautiful. So we have to be aware of that. I think in terms of the specific question about the local bit of it, for me, there are two things when we talk about proximity or local food, and one thing is about where it's produced and how close it is for where it's consumed, but the other thing is how many people have handled that food and who keeps the value of that food. So I think big corporations are not very good at handing the value of that food to the farmers. So I think that's one of the things that we need to be highlighting more, not only that it's being produced next door, but also who is supporting and how many steps has it taken to arrive to the consumer as well. And that's the big part of power as well. It's not only territorial, but it's like who in the chain has the power and keeps the value.
Yeah, I have a comment really addressed to the lady from the Belgian project, Bark, was it? Yeah, about, your comments about food from aquaponics and hydroponics not having any nutrients. I'm sorry, I cannot let that pass. I've been working in aquaponics for more than a decade. I can share with you many papers that shows that it is at least as nutritionally complete as conventional food grown in soil. And I think, really, if we are looking for sustainable circular food systems, we really do need to embrace these modern technologies. There are so many resources that are wasted from cities, grey water, urine, everything else. We're very happy in most European countries for, sewage to get spread on fields to grow crops. Once it's been cleaned, there's so many opportunities within the city to recycle these resources which are full of nutrients and use them to grow food, hydroponically. Just one more comment. There's a lot of talk about organic, and I assume that when you're using the term organic, you're talking about organic certification. Again, where's the evidence that is nutritionally any better? What does organic mean? It means that it's, food that's grown in a particular kind of way with, certain fertilizers that are permitted, the certification, but incidentally also happens to exclude hydroponic and aquaponic production at the moment. Why? Because essentially, the organic movement, which started in the UK with the Soil Association, it's become a protectionist cabal. It's all about, maintaining soil fertility. Nothing wrong with that. I champion that. But, the EU really needs to reconsider organic certification and allow these more modern technologies, which we really are going to need in the future with climate change, which means it's going to be so much more difficult to grow, in fields. We need a bigger mindset, not just sort of talking about, markets and supporting local conventional farmers. Thank you.
Hi, I don't know if you want to comment. That seems like a good conflict skill-making experience, but there's a silence. So we're stuck in it again, I guess. So I just got into the definition that you shared on governance with the action. Like, I like, what are the main verbs or main actions that are in the definition of governance that you shared? So I may have made a mistake, but I got guiding, steering, controlling, and managing. So these were the 4 kind of actions of governance, you could say. And I wanted to ask the panel if they could add their action, like if you could add more ways of governing beyond guide, steer, control, and manage, which would be the words that you would bring into governance? Which actions do you think are really needed for future governance of our food systems? Not saying that these aren't valuable, these 4, but just maybe to add in your own flavors to this definition.
Thank you. I love how we are turning the academic value around.
Well, I mean, this definition comes from like a very established definition on policy science about what is governance, and it's kind of like adapted to the first system. It is nice to be challenged to improve your own definition. Okay, let's go for it. I think, I mean, these verbs are quite broad to like actually encompass many things. But I think one of the things that is very important is also framing. So it is about like capturing people's imagination about where do we want to go and what do we think is possible, and trying to get people to want that and go towards that. So I think framing it's very important, and we sometimes think it's not, but I do think it is really plays a key role in governing food systems.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I think it was an interesting comment, because I think that governance should be more about responsiveness. And I think that, you know, the term governance, public organizations and municipalities are more responsive to business interests than citizens in general. Mm-hmm. So I think that's sort of part of the problem with governance. We really like to control instead of sort of listening to people. Yeah.
Can I add something? Because I think in this governance, you're already saying part of what I wanted to say, but I think what's forgotten is really informing the people who it's about. There's no connection. The knowledge is not always shared. Nobody has an opportunity to talk about it. And I think you should work on a common language. Yes? So that's what we're also with this diamond model that we're doing. It's nice that you have a common language or like a way of talking about things. So people really can have an opinion and listen to this opinion. There's so much more people who can have a say in this. I think they don't have enough knowledge.
Yeah, and I have another comment also. It's the sort of neoliberal system that we live in, where we have to actually prove that this is a value. Right. You have key performance indicators, and you have to have your diamond model to actually show the people, the decision makers, that this is a value. Shouldn't they know, you know? They don't. Yeah. I mean, maybe earlier they did, but now everything is about money. So, yeah, I think that's the problem with governance.
Does that answer your question? If I can just maybe use my opportunity here to add one more, I think maybe questioning is an important one to do, because you also showed us how important it is to put the right questions on the table so that you can get the right responses. Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Or any more comments from the panel? Okay, I see 2 more. I think.
So from what I heard, and also from the previous talk, the municipality gets a very strong power, or should have a very strong influence on how to shape the local food system. Where does the city start, and where does the power of the city end? So at which point it should also include like CSOs and other organizations to transform the food system, so that the targets of, I would say, an increased local supply of about more healthy food can be reached, this target. Do you know what I mean?
You are kind of referring to the boundaries, no?
Yeah, what
of the
can a
city.
city do, and where are the limits, and where does it need partners, also for the public procurement, in order to reach this goal, or of an increased local food supply, for example?
Yeah, as long as we think that's okay, we have the power, I think. As long as we buy the products and agree with the system, only talking inside the houses about that it's not working, I think nothing is changing. So if we don't buy the products, we have lots of power, only we don't show the power.
I think it's also a question of the problem of the systems. I mean, the policymakers and the people managing the systems are working for bigger and bigger contracts and lower prices. They're not at all at being aware of the sustainable transition. Like, it's scary when you listen to the first presentations today, to look at how policymakers and people managing the regulations and giving advice to municipalities on how they should procure the food for the city, what the actually policy advice is. Like, I'm like shocked.
Yeah. I think that, and I think maybe I didn't mention in my presentation, or mention it very briefly, but cities have some powers, but the power that each city has, it depends first on the structure of its government. Like, there are some powers that are attached to cities, like urban planning. There are other powers here that sit in the regional government. There are other powers that sit in the national government or the European government. Public procurement, for example, is shaped by European laws, and then there are kind of like different stages when you can modify something. So cities have some powers, but depending on each country, like, they have like some certain formal powers and others that they don't have. In fact, many times when you speak to city councillors, what they tell you is like, food is not my responsibility. I don't have a mandate on food. It's not like a sector that normally cities work on. Transport is something, housing is like for cities, but food is not. Food is something that we're taking on now but we don't have the powers. And I hear like many councillors on and on again saying like, but we have limited powers to do things. But they do have some powers. So like, for example, urban planning is a key power. Doing things around public procurement is a key power. And you have ways of like using these invisible powers that are not only your constitutional, like responsibilities. You have other ways of like changing things, like I was saying, with these invisible ways. For example, one thing that Barcelona has done with its food strategy is like develop a food strategy, and then is asking actors to actually not only adhere to the food strategy, but make commitments, what they are going to do in the next 2-3 years that contributes to developing that food strategy. That's a way of using the power that the municipality has as a convening actor to push other actors to do things. They cannot tell a supermarket what to do, or a small shop what to do, or a civil society organization what to do, but they can like work with them and try to engage them so that they actually commit to a common agenda. So, I mean, there are many, and the example I put, it was like the difference between maybe Brazil and Belo Horizonte. There is this amazing example of like ensuring the right to food in the city, to other places where they don't have resources or like very little like legal tools to actually implement changes.
Thank you. I think there was one more question, and maybe we can consider that the last one, unless there is any other burning ones.
Thank you. I just wanted to retake the comment from our fellow colleague here. So I was thinking, probably we should consider a bit more broadly the metabolics of the city, no? So there is the need of the food, but also all of the waste that we create. And some of the waste that we create is not necessarily something that we just dump somewhere, so it can be integrated into the system. I think I agree with the aquaponics comment, and I think it's a tool that is not really being looked at as a really a big opportunity to give cities a bit more resilience and independence on food production. And well, I just wanted to know if there is anything along those lines.
On the specific comment on the aquaponics and the technology, I admit that I'm not knowledgeable enough to comment on it, on the impacts on it in terms of what it was said of this debate of whether they are more or less nutritious and all of this. What my comment was gearing towards is that we do have very small, very few ways of showing the different impacts, mostly environmental impacts of food production, and the only way that we have right now is widely available this organic certification. So I think we need to probably have a conversation about it and see how we integrate the impact of food production in our frameworks and in our tools in a much more serious way, because we are in a house is on fire, no? Like we say right now. So that would be the first thing. And about the metabolism of the city, I'm totally with you here in terms of understanding not only what the city needs in terms of food, but also what it generates. Also because our food system is so energy intensive, all the demands in terms of energy that the city has, the water, where is it coming from, also in relation to food production. So there are all these dependencies that cities have in other spaces, hinterlands and far, far away, that we need to tackle in a much more serious way to make cities more sustainable and also more responsible, to really create these justice relationships and not being only a place that extracts resources from other places and it gives back waste or problems to manage things. So we really need to think about this in a much more serious way.
Thank you. Well, I think everybody seems to be ready for a coffee break. And I believe the coffee is waiting outside. Maybe just a small take from the discussion that we just had from my side, because I could feel like there are some ghosts in the room that are maybe not physically present, and we need to consider inviting next time on the table of discussion of governance. It's the private sector on the one hand. We did not hear any comments, or we don't have any representatives from their side. And the other one is in a way our shadow, our other side for us as consumers, no? Because we are here representing the different organizations that we work with, but we are all at the same time also consumers, and maybe that's something to take for another discussion on governance in follow-up sessions. Obviously, there are no clear answers, I think, but it was important that we opened quite a lot of questions, because as we discussed, I think it's important to put the right questions on the table or in our heads and keep on thinking about them. Well, thank you very much to all the presenters, Carolina, Nienke, Kristin, and Anna. Thank you also to you for your active engagement and critical discussions that you had. I think we had some nice exchange here. And I would like also to thank the online speakers who are watching us, and to let them know that now we will close this session and the streaming channel will reopen again at 6 o'clock, when we will have the EdisitNet Awards ceremony. And you will have the chance to meet the winners of this year's EdisitNet Awards in person and to hear from the inspirational stories. So with that, I would just like to maybe give you just an idea of what's happening next. Before the EDICITNet Award session, which starts at 6, we have the so-called poster and networking session. So after you have a coffee or together with your coffee, you're welcome to go out and walk around the posters that are on the corridor just outside the main room, where you will have the people who produce those posters, and you'll be able to discuss with them and take this further. At the same time, we will have here on the screen a number of videos showing examples of some of the living labs and the work that's being done in the living labs for the EDICITNet project. So if you're curious to see and learn a bit more about them, we will be showing them here on the screen. And a third activity for those who have the energy of doing something more creative and walking around would be to do a kind of edible walk, or to explore and imagine how you can improve the neighborhood around by adding some new edible solutions to it. And for that, please come to me, and we will try to see if there are enough volunteers to organize this activity, or we will leave that. Thank you.